Okay, good morning and warmly welcome to this morning webinar uh, in the series of special issue, which is a new morning coffee session series started by Nord Media Network to present new Nordic media and communication and journalism research. We started this series last month because we thought that a lot of interesting research is being published in special issues, and we wanted to highlight the good work that Nordic journals in different disciplines, media-related disciplines, are doing. So please grab a coffee and join us for this morning session, which will be actually about youth work. My name is Maarit Jaakkola, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Nord Media Network, but in this case I was also a co-editor of this special issue. The special issue was about how young people are living their lives in digital worlds, in and with and through screens and with social media, online services, and different digital cultures. Digital cultural practices are related to meaning making, identity creation, and creating different relationships, and that was something we wanted to explore in a special issue that was published by the Nordic Journal of Youth Studies. So today I will first present the special issue in its entity, because the first co-editor, Sevda Gurdal from University West in Sweden, could not make it, unfortunately. So I will take her part and present the special issue. Thereafter, we will hear about one study that was included in the special issue by the Danish author Stine Liv Johansen from Aarhus University, and thereafter there will be a possibility to ask questions. So let's start with the special issue and especially the journal. The Nordic Journal of Youth Studies, or Nordisk Tidskrift for Ungdomsforskning, is an open access interdisciplinary social science journal that publishes articles in Scandinavian languages and English, and it has a decade-long tradition because it's actually a continuation of the Norwegian journal Tidskrift for Ungdomsforskning, which was established in 2001. But since 2019, it has a more international profile. And it aims at contributing towards a growth in knowledge around youth and youth life in the Nordic countries, and aims also at being the leading publication platform for Nordic youth research. It's published by Scandinavian University Press and classified at level 1, both in Norway and Finland. This is the editorial stuff. At this point, we want to express our special thanks to the editors-in-chief of the journal and also the editorial assistants who have been helping us along the way. The call for papers for this particular special issue came out last year, and we wanted to capture the different dimensions of the digital lives and digital cultures, and wanted to take the lives of young people in social media more seriously and try to understand the true importance that different digital practices have for the young people. And as a result of this call, we got 6 articles by 10 authors from Scandinavia. Unfortunately, only from Scandinavia. There were also other articles included at the beginning, but as you know, there is also always a review process. So these articles that are now included in the final product come from Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. And they are written in English, Danish, and Swedish, which is also quite nice to be able to include both Scandinavian languages and English language studies in one issue. Common themes are well-being, ill-being, contesting boundaries, creating boundaries, and leaving behind the digital childhood and becoming young. Our discourse on online uses of young people is often dominated by the focus on potential harms and risks, and the worries are of course motivated because as one of our authors notices, there has been a well-documented crisis in well-being among youth in the Nordic region as in the wider Western world. But unfortunately, this discourse emphasizes maybe even too much the needs for restrictions and other measures to be taken, and instead of just asking how processes can be hindered or restricted, we wanted to ask what these processes matter to the users and see the processes as more complex. By transgressing boundaries or suffering from bad actions, we also learn how to keep those boundaries, either individual or collective. So there are 6 articles, and we will soon hear more about Stina Liv's study, which is about physical disabilities on social media. But in brief, about the other articles, Clara Julia Reich from Oslo Metropolitan University addresses the phenomenon of shipping on social media, especially on Snapchat and TikTok. And what is shipping, you may ask? It refers to a playful media practice originating from online fan communities where users who are fans couple characters with each other. So it means romantic pairing of characters, and it comes from the word relationship. So shipping is a topic that has been quite richly studied in fandom studies and especially fan fiction, but not via social media accounts and not in the Nordic countries. This is not said in the article, but I learned that it has been first used in the TV series X-Files. In her study, Reich is interested in how users in their pre-teens in Oslo engage in shipping by creating, testing and challenging boundaries, and she conceptualizes shipping in terms of practice theory embedded in everyday life management of young persons. And she says that when a person, the shipper, makes decisions on the romantic pairing of two characters, the shipper can envision age and gender in norm-critical terms, but also contest and transgress individual, collective, and even legal boundaries, and re-establish social order. And it's also about having fun and experimenting. Then Sietse Hølvig Mikkelsen has done ethnographic fieldwork among vulnerable people, or as she puts it, on the edge, people who are on the edge of the educational system. She studies the experiences and perceptions of students in vulnerable positions in rural Denmark, and she has 10 in-depth interviews with individuals who after 9 years of compulsory education are neither employed or engaged in any further education. This paper is very theoretical and explores the concept of new vulnerability, which extends beyond the classical socioeconomic factors and is characterized by experiences of pressure, high expectations and performance, leading to an introversion of responsibility, self-blaming, and ultimately a loss of resonance with the world. This is very well formulated, I think. So she as a result, she tries to understand how vulnerabilities and marginalization interact. Then there is another paper where Clara Julia Reich is involved by 4 authors, and they examine young Norwegians' perspectives on sharenting, which means parents content sharing about their children on social media. And sharenting is about parent-child relationships, and this particular study traces the limits of acceptable parenting in the Nordic countries, where there is quite a high degree of trust between people. So it turns out in the study that the children and adolescents wish to be asked more for consent to control their digital identities, and parents should also have more education on the consequences of sharenting. Then Lea Louise Wiedet has written her article about fieldwork and interviews among 10, 11-year-old children in a 5th grade class in a rural northern Norway. And she explores how the uses of social media create new age demarcations and transitions from being a child to becoming a teenager. And the article demonstrates how the children narratives link social age to having their own phone and to specific social media. So it's about ownership. She concludes that young people can take more control of their social relationships by making their own agreements, by being together in new ways in online spaces, where they are more likely than before to set the terms of the interaction by themselves when they get their own phones and apps. And then last but not least, Judith Lind and Annette Wikström have a case study about a video where a Swedish social media influencer responds to some accusations that she inaccurately uses the word anxiety to describe her feelings. And based on an interview data with almost 40 teenage girls, of which the majority support the influencer, the authors conclude that the girls' reactions to the influencer's video reflect and contribute to a dominant health discourse which emphasizes individual responsibility for one's well-being, as well as the individual's right to defend and label it. And the study is presented in the article as part of a larger research project focusing on teenage girls' mental health and understanding of social media messages. So you can soon read the entire special issue online, but before that, let's give the screen to Stine Liv Johansen, who is an associate professor at the School of Communication and Culture at Aarhus University in Denmark, and she has been studying digital childhood for a very long time, and very recently, she co-authored a new book together with Malene Charlotte Larsen, which is called Social Media Across Everyday Contexts, Digital Childhood and Youth in the Nordics, and it came out at Samfundslitteratur. So, the title of Stine is I just want to show that I'm living a normal life. Young people with physical disabilities on social media. Please, very welcome, Stine Liv Johansen.
Thank you so much, Marit, and thank you also to the whole editorial team for putting together this. This is actually the first time I see the whole list of contributions to this special issue, so I'm just looking forward to reading all the really, really nice and very interesting articles that you just listed. And I particularly find it very relevant, especially as you also refer to the whole discourse about children, youth, and media today, that we really have these studies that focus through ethnographic research, through in-depth interviews on children and young people's own perspectives. And I find that extremely important. So I'm also just going to share my screen where I have a few slides. And from that, I will say a little bit about the article that I wrote for this special issue. This is, as Marit said, I've been working in this area of children, youth, and media for many, many years, but I've also always primarily studied children and youth who either signed up themselves or whose mothers signed them up, or who I could recruit through elementary schools, you could say normal children and youth. And I came to realize that there were many groups of children and youth who we almost systematically left out of empirical research. And I wanted to do something about that with a specific focus on children and youth with different types of disabilities. And in this case, I have made a small interview study with young people who have quite severe physical disabilities. They are all wheelchair users, meaning that they also, through the eyes of other people, appear differently. People notice them when they are in their everyday life, and I wanted to talk to them about how social media for them could be a place where they could present themselves and represent themselves in new and relevant ways. Generally, you could say that media and disability is a very widespread and also emerging research agenda. And I feel that myself, I'm just taking baby steps into this area of research. Luckily, I have people with me who knows more about this, so that we can work together on this. But generally, I am primarily interested in how popular culture in general, being TV, films, but also in particular social media, sort of frames the overall understanding of what it means to be a person living with a disability, and also what it means for people, especially children and youth with disabilities, how they feel that they are represented in popular media discourses. So I want to especially highlight these young users who are most often left out of both childhood studies and also media studies, what my colleague Louise Butcher from Danish School of Education has called the double discrimination of children and youth with disability. So that is something I want to focus on, and maybe we can also talk about later how to actually do that, because it also takes some new ways of thinking about your research methodologies if you want to actually involve people who physically or cognitively have different ways of being in the world. So what I did in this particular study is that I was in an ongoing dialogue, and I still am, with a specific patients organization in Denmark. They had and still have a video project going on where these young people are making videos for YouTube. And I was quite interested in that. So I came in contact with them they had their own sort of internal Instagram group that I was being led into. And I presented myself and asked if anyone wanted to participate in an interview. And 5 of them signed up. They were between 13 and 22 years old, which is, of course, a broad age span. And that is something you should also, of course, take into consideration when when looking at these interviews, that of course we're also dealing with young people who are at very different life stages, from living at home with their parents to taking their steps out into an adult world. I transcribed and coded all the interviews, and I focused on specific, also theoretically informed aspects, of which I will give you a little bit of insight now. First of all, I'm interested in how social media, you could say, means more to us than what's sometimes superficially meets the eye. As Tiedenberg and Cruz said back in 2015, we are often sort of dismissing these social media practices. In this case, they're talking about selfies as something frivolous and self-absorbed. So when people are using social media to present themselves to the world, we can also often see it as something, superficial and something not that relevant. But what it actually turns out to be is that it's very often, as it says here, more complex than this dismissal allows. And that is what we see when we actually talk to people about these things. And that is, I think, what these articles in this special issue also represents. And also people like Carsten Stage and others have been talking a lot about how social media platforms can be used for practices relating to health and illness, vulnerability, to representing a body, a vulnerable body, as they say here, during illness and treatment. And that is something I am also very inspired by in this project. And I just want to show a few quotes, and I need to organize the screen a little bit so I can actually see the whole quote. And I think this particular quote is something that it just comes back to me again and again, because this is a young woman talking about how she wants to be seen as a normal person. And that has also, of course, led to the title of this particular article. She says, "I use social media a lot to show that even though I'm disabled, I can still have a normal life, a normal, well-functioning life, and do the same things as any other normal person, like those who do not have a disability. And I also think that it has to do with the fact that all my life I've met certain taboos." This is her words, taboos. I might want to call it stigma. But she says taboos about what it's like to be disabled, about what you can and cannot do. And I would like to break those down a little to sort of show that we also have a life like everyone else. Maybe it just looks a bit different. So she really represents what many of these young people are telling me. They want to be seen as persons who are part of this society, who are, they also want to be seen as mature and grown-up persons. They tell me about some of the worst things they can imagine and that they have experienced is when people approach them in the street and talk to them as if they were a baby, because their bodily appearance and in some cases also their voices may be impaired by the disability they have, so they sound and look different than other people, and they want to sort of show that they are just a normal person inside. Generally, a lot has been said theoretically also about the representation of the disabled body, and I'm just in this article touching a little bit upon what could be relevant theoretical approaches. Generally, what I think is very important when we talk about how the body in general, but also the disabled body is represented in media, we should talk about what are the ableist assumptions, and how do we also, from an outside perspective, see how do we understand what is going on between people with disabilities? As Bittman says here, we should overcome what is described as ableist assumptions and theories about what disability activism looks and feels like. I will not go much into detail with the theoretical aspects. I touch more upon them in the article. This quote is also something that I've returned to over and over again and talked to many people about. This is a 13-year-old girl who talks. She's also a wheelchair user, but she can also stand and walk a little bit. But she doesn't like to be photographed when she's standing up, because, as she says, when she stands up, it sometimes looks a little funny, because people with this diagnosis that she has, sometimes their legs are pointing inwards. Like, it's difficult to explain, but there is such a way. So, for instance, if my personal helper is supporting me when she's standing up or something, then sometimes I choose not to post it, because I think it's kind of, although I really want to show everything, I still don't want to show this. I don't know. I just think it's because I think it looks, this might sound strange, but a bit too disabled-ish. It's not as if, well, I don't think that I see myself this way. Well, I don't know. And there are so many things going on in this quote. One thing is the immediate sort of contradictions in what she is saying, because she feels that she looks too disabled when she's standing up and not as disabled when she's sitting in her wheelchair. I showed my daughter, who's now in her mid-20s, and I showed her this quote, and she said, I didn't want to post pictures of my legs when I was 13 either. So maybe this is also just a matter of being a 13-year-old girl and being aware of how to appear on social media. And of course, all those things can be true at the same time. There's a lot of theories about the way that people with disabilities decide to disclosure or not disclosure their appearances. And I think that this quote says a lot about that. This is not an either or. This is something that is a continuous discussion and negotiation for each person. How much do you want to show? And I just want to wrap up with this quote from the interview also that I find really interesting, because it says something about how social media enables these young people to tell their own story. This is an 18-year-old woman who says to me, I use the social media, to get out there what her specific condition is, so that people don't just what's it called? Well, they're still looking at me, but it is as if they have a bit more, they're more open to asking questions when one meets them in the street and so on. And then I ask her, yes, is that something that has happened to you? Well, yes, for instance, if someone has followed me on Insta, then they have come over when they've seen me and they have talked to me just passing by and looking at me. They have asked me about it. And I really like that, not being seen like that. So again, what she's talking about here is being seen as a whole person, not just being seen as her diagnosis. And as I said, the work continues. I still have collaboration with this patients organization, and I will in November, and I really look forward to that. For a whole weekend, I'll be attending their video project bootcamp and hang out with these young people, and then see what comes out of that. So I just wanted to end on that note. So thank you very much for listening. This was what I wanted to say, and I only spoke for a few minutes more than I was allowed to. So thank you.
No problem. Stine, Liv, thank you. Then Linus Andersson, our third co-editor, will have some comments.
Yes, and thank you. And thank you for this presentation. And I'm happy to finally meet you.
Yeah, me too.
having read your work and so on. I think I'm speaking on behalf of the guest editorial team. We were very happy to be able to include your work in this special issue because I think it's a really valuable contribution to the discussion of being young in the digital age today. I think perhaps my bias is that for the past 10 years or so, I've been working in an academic institution called the School of Health and Welfare that I share with colleagues who are in disability studies and have various approaches to young people that are not my own background in like popular culture and things like that, but from various different things. So I've been engaged in a lot of discussions related to these things. So one of the things, aside from just commenting by praising your work, I have some questions that I would like to ask you if you could elaborate on. One of them is the combination, the emerging research agenda that you mentioned. Can you say something about what you see as the potentials of media studies and disability studies and that combination?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I've been thinking about a lot also, because when I look at the growing body of literature in this area, and especially the literature related to representation of people with, but also a little bit about children and youth with disabilities in popular media. I think that we are still at a stage where this is very much a textual analysis approach that we see there, and we see very little discussion about children and youth also. So just there, at least, I think that moving a little bit away from textual analysis and more into, for instance, more ethnographic, user focused research, and then also in particular research about children and youth. I find that very important that we should do that. I assume this is the case in many countries, but at least in Denmark, we have at least one or two documentaries or sort of reality documentaries, something like that, about children and youth with disability each year. We have a show called The Rare Danes about young people with rare diagnoses, and those children who have been followed by a TV crew since their very early childhood are also now being presented on social media by their parents. So we also have real children who are living their life in relation to media, and I think that would be very relevant to look more into how that is going on. But I also think that there's some challenges, but also potentials in working with a more flexible and perhaps also more pragmatic methodological approach to actually include these young people. The young people I interviewed here, that was kind of easy. I mean, we just made a Zoom call, and they were very well used to using those types of platforms. But of course, if I wanted to meet with them in person, that would be a little bit more tricky. First of all, because they live across the country, but also because they can't just jump on a train and go somewhere. So if we wanted to do something like that, we had to be a bit more pragmatic. And that is, of course, also the case if we are talking about children and young people with sensory disabilities, could be blindness, and in particular also children and young people with cognitive disabilities. That we need a discussion about how we can adapt our research methods to also include them in empirical research. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good and I think inspiring discussion on how to develop methodology. If I may, I have another thing that I would like you to expand upon, because reading your article and listen to your discussion, the term that is in the title as well, the normal life thing. To whom do do the young people that you interviewed wish to show their lives as normal? Because on the one hand, it's within, you could say, a community of people who live with disabilities, and to be able to inspire younger kids who are going through the same kind of experiences and so on. And on the other hand, to reach out into the, I don't know what to call it, the um, majority society, or a society of normally abled body and so on. Is there a tension there between those two functions, or how do they relate to each other, do you think?
I think that of course they are approaching, you could say, both ends of that spectrum. But I think that when they talk about showing that they're living a normal life, this is very much addressed towards the majority, to the able-bodied community, you could say. They told me about some of the questions they sometimes get, like people asking them, so do you sleep in your wheelchair, or how do you eat? Those very practical questions that they also actually want to address. They also want to show what it is like living, going through youth, with, of course, education and all that, but also a lot of hospital visits, and what it is like to have a personal helper throughout the day, etc., etc. So they want to sort of, I think what I hear from what they're saying is that they sort of want to build a bridge between what is seen as a normal youth, going to school, having friends, going to parties, having romantic relationships, etc., and then what is specific about having a disability. And some of them, especially the older ones, are also talking about how they're also talking about this is on a more sort of abstract level between what is disability specific and what is common for everyone, because they also say, well, we are all struggling with things. So sometimes they also feel that they might struggle with something and then say to themselves, well, it's because I have a disability. But then it turns out that a lot of people recognize what they're struggling with, regardless of their bodily condition. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the great takeaways from reading your article is that you come up with I don't know, a broader perspective of what normal life is. I think that is something that happens to me as a reader when I encounter this. So, Marit, am I allowed to continue asking questions, or should we open up for discussions?
Maybe we can invite everybody to ask questions, because I guess there are people who want to ask questions. But if not, then we can continue. So we ask this way: do you have any questions? Beata, please.
Yes, if that's okay.
It's completely okay.
I thank you so much for a great presentation on a very interesting topic. And it's, of course, as you mentioned and others mentioned now, it's a important perspective to bring to the forefront, of course. And so I wrote down this question before this question on normality was raised, but so it's sort of related, because I found it very interesting when you mentioned your daughter and how she reasoned on being a teenager. And so I was wondering, do you have any other like similar examples of how they reflected upon whether their expressions were being expressions of being a disabled teen or being a normal teen, so to speak? Could you say something about that?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. It is something that I don't write much about it in the paper, but especially among the older informants in this study, they talk about the struggles that they are living with right now, which are not necessarily that related to being a wheelchair user, but it's more related to making your own home, moving away from your parents, deciding on what educational course you should approach. And especially one of them is reflecting very much upon what is, he uses those words. What is disability specific, and what is just human experiences in general. And it actually turned out that I had to make a new interview with him to continue talking about these things. It's not. It's something I would like to continue writing about, but it didn't fit within the frames of this article that much. I only touch upon it briefly. So I think this is something we should definitely think about, especially as someone coming from outside a disability community. If you could talk about that. I mean, I'm just looking in on their lives. I'm an adult. I am able-bodied. I don't have those kinds of experiences, so I need them to help me discuss whether when something is related to having a disability or when it's just related to having to just being 13 years old. But I think especially for the younger ones, they are not that reflected on those issues. Of course, they're in the middle of it, but it would be interesting to, well, as I said, I will continue having discussions with these young people, and I find it very fruitful to talk to them about all these things. I also think a lot about how this should not be something. How can you say it shouldn't be something very exotic or particularly interesting, and they're not wiser than anyone else just because they're in a wheelchair. I mean, they don't have the answers to what it's like being a young person more than any other young person does. So we also need to think about where do we position ourselves in that in these discussions also as researchers, as we should always do when we study children and young people, of course.
Thank you so much.
But I don't have a clear answer to that. That's something
no one has, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Beata, for asking, and thank you, Stina-Li, for answering. It's fascinating that you are actually sharing, Stina-Li, your journey where you are moving towards a new area, and this is also a good lesson learned or something to learn for us, because we are constantly trying to learn new areas as media researchers. So it's very empowering to see how you are taking yourself into a new area, and then you don't maybe have any final answers yet. No one has. Could you? Well, I was just thinking about the methodological challenges. You said that we should adapt our research methods to their needs, and you also talked about deconstructing the power relations, and see as in any research situations. Do you see any parallels with other minorities when researchers are approaching, for example, ethnic minorities or linguistic minorities, or any other where the distinction between majority society and minority society comes into play?
Absolutely. And I mean, the most obvious thing is that we focus so much on language, written or oral language, that we make survey studies which you have to be able to read in order to answer them. And also the whole interview situation in itself is something that we should also have a critical look towards. Is that always the best way of approaching children and young people, I would say, in general? And I come from a background where I did my PhD on very young children who could not be part of an interview. So for me, it's maybe not that. I actually find it quite fruitful and inspiring to think about how can we approach you could say audience studies or user studies in new ways instead of just focusing on interviews and survey studies. So but again, I would say that it depends so much, just as we need more specificity when it comes to what is social media use, what social media are we talking about. We also need more specificity when it comes to what are the needs of that specific user group that we are targeting here. So again, there's no blanket answer to that. We need to think about how can we do that, how can we approach that in the best possible way in order for as many people as possible to be involved in our research. Because if we leave out a lot of people from our research, we won't get clear and relevant answers to our questions. So.
Thank you. That should be the final words. And we thank you, Stina-Liv, very much for sharing your results with us and showing how young people with disabled bodies are making the world into a more bearable place for themselves, actually, by shaping the discourse and the representations through social media. And here I was actually thinking about an American couple called Hannah and Shane, who have been showing their lives. The other one is disabled, the other one is abled, and they have started talking about themselves being an interabled couple. So you can also, this is a good example of how you can really shape the discourses and ideas about things. So on behalf of all editors, I'd like to express my thanks to everyone who were involved in the creation of this special issue. Contributors, reviewers, editors, support staff behind the scenes. Your commitment made this possible. So thank you for your efforts and contributions, and please do continue to follow us. Our next webinar will be about another type of research in another discipline. So you will find all the programs at nordmedianetwork.org. Thank you this time. Thank you, Stina-Liv. Thank you, Linus. Thank you, our audience, and see you next time.
Thank
Bye.
you.